This is the 5th day of this March 1981 7-day session, and we will once more read from the sayings and dialogues of Bankei, first from this selection of translations from the Eastern Buddhist and also from a selection from a book called The Original Face, an Anthology of Rinzai Zen, translated and edited by Thomas Cleary. Bankei said, "I urge people always to live by the unborn Buddha mind alone. There are no additional rules. Nevertheless, since everyone got together and decided they wanted to do Zazen for a period of 12 incense sticks, parenthesis here it says about 6 hours, this is calculating an incense stick to be half hour, some of them are 1 hour, so it would be 12 hours, we don't exactly know. Each day, probably people wanted to come together for a sesshin. I told them to do as they pleased and set aside 6 hours for their Zazen. But the unborn Buddha mind has nothing at all to do with sticks of incense. If you live by the Buddha mind and do not go astray from it, you need seek no further enlightenment. If you just sit by the Buddha mind, just live by the Buddha mind, just sleep by the Buddha mind, just arise by the Buddha mind, just dwell by the Buddha mind, and in all the normal activities of your daily life, you're functioning as a living Buddha. There's nothing further. Which is a tremendous thing he's talking about here, as we all know. Here, as we're practicing the nearest we can come to saying what this unborn Buddha mind is, it is not knowing, questioning, not knowing in a sesshin. And not just in a sesshin. Not knowing means not bringing all one's past history to bear on what one sees or hears or does. And to be aware that one is doing it, that this is going on. That's the first step. That awareness, is that the unborn Buddha mind? It is if in it there's nothing born, no old stuff, no justification or condemnation. Nothing, just the perceiving, just the seeing, purely. As Zazen is a matter of the Buddha mind sitting quietly, when you live in the Buddha mind, you're always in Zazen. That's what was written once to a person living abroad, the great yearning to come here, little time to come here, maybe once a year or twice a year. This person said, "Yeah, but you have that Zendo there. We all have our Zendo right within. Obviously, it's much easier to sit in a Zendo than someplace where people never have even heard about it and think that's and if they see that or one talks about it, or one mentions it, they think it's the oddest thing anybody could do. because they may feel threatened by it. Zazen is not limited merely to the period of sitting. Even though you are sitting, you may rise if you have something to do. Thus, I have everyone here do as they wish. A person may do kinhin for one stick of incense. Since he cannot just remain standing, he sits down and does zazen for one stick of incense. It is hardly possible to sleep all the time. So he gets up. As he cannot be speaking constantly, he falls silent and does zazen. We're not bound by any set rules. It must have been quite an amazing temple he ran. Certainly he was not bound by any rules. He saw through them and saw that rules don't do the trick. Here's a sermon of the second day of the 9th month. As I have been telling you, each of you is inherently the Buddha mind, but having through habit and usage grown accustomed to a bad way of life, you have turned this Buddha mind into a grudging, grasping, hungry ghost existence. You have turned this Buddha mind into a grudging, grasping, hungry ghost existence. This is the way Bankei always talks. He uses these words. You turn the Buddha mind into something else. And yet, can the Buddha mind be turned into anything? One is excited, somebody insults one, and there's anger, or resentment, or rage welling up. Why say the Buddha mind has been turned into something? It's nowhere around at that moment for that person. Yet if there is really a loving heart, attention and awareness, as this person says this insult, whatever it is, this unfair treatment, can one attend to that? I don't say one must, and it becomes again something else. Can one attend to it? Is it possible to attend to it so completely that this does not become a cause? Because it does not become a cause, then there is no effect within oneself. So nothing is marked down, nothing is planted. This is what is meant in the second koan of the Mumon Kan, not ignoring causation. Potential causation is all around us. How do we respond? With an effect? And we're not talking here about physical causation, something crashing on your head and you're getting an open skull, needing stitches and all that. But being assaulted by unfair words. For instance, it's a potential cause. Does it have to be a cause? Yes, when one responds in old conditioned ways. Same to you. Or can one listen? Be attentive. Then one will not to be able to hate, there will not be no hatred of that person, no offense, but understanding, which is a tremendous thing. In that case, to use Bankei's words, the Buddha mind hasn't been turned into anything. There's nothing to turn. Either one responds in old conditioned ways, or there's an awareness of that. Old conditioned ways are the wheel of suffering, the wheel of samsara, going on and on since time immemorial. The same stuff in a little bit different forms, a little bit, it seems, an increased volume as population increases. You have turned the Buddha mind into a grudging, grasping, hungry ghost existence. When you know this and fully realize it, fully perceive it, see it, understand it, are clear about it, you take on the nature of the unborn. Again, words are so difficult. It's so difficult to use words. It's not you take it on. There's no you to take anything on. That's when the Buddha nature is in full bloom, when there's no you, no me. However, if upon deciding you want to become the unborn, you want to become the unborn, already a conceptualization of this unborn, I want to become that. And you try to stop yourself from growing angry. I must not be angry, because I want to become that. And from regretting or desiring things, you want to try to stop yourself from growing angry, or from regretting, or from desiring things or people. Then your one mind becomes two. And we can add 3 and 4 and 5 and 10. And all these desires in combat with each other. I do desire, but also I don't want to desire. I shouldn't desire. It's like chasing after a running man. The running man being oneself. Oneself chasing after oneself. How ridiculous. Because this one who wants to be in control is all these bad habits. Can one see that? They're not two. What happens when you try to stop the flow of your thoughts? What happens when you try to stop the flow of your thoughts? I must stop them. Is that the thought to stop their arising struggles against the constantly arising thoughts. And so there's no stop. We go over this and Doksan. And sometimes people get an inkling of this, and there's a relief from this burden of always having to do something about oneself. The doer being oneself with all one's ignorance. Or is that doer seeing? If that doer is seeing, then there's just seeing and not this constant compulsion to do something, which is only meddling and muddling. Who or mu? That's something different. Or is it? Or is it just your way of finding a new technique of doing something about yourself? Then it is more of the same stuff. But who innocently. Is that possible? To ask who or mu innocently, not knowing what will come from it. Not knowing. At the same time noticing what support one gets from all one knows, and how difficult it is to question not knowing. Because then there's great anxiety that arises, which must be faced by every human being. If there's to be freedom from this habitual wheel of samsara, which is all of our conditioning since time immemorial. So, Bankei continues, even though you may grow angry in spite of yourself, or give rise to regrets, or desire things, leave such thoughts alone. Don't bring them along any farther, and don't hold fast to them. The moment of attention, one already doesn't bring them any farther. But one may very well board a different train. The train of I shouldn't have these thoughts, and my neighbor looks so empty. How long, I wonder, has he or she practiced? If I practice that long, maybe I'll look that empty too. It's nothing to do with length of time. It may or it may not. One cannot say. If we get to it, we'll hear Bankei say something about that later. Don't be concerned about stopping or about not stopping them. If you have nothing to do with them, they cannot fail to cease of themselves. Because ultimately it is this I, this compulsive I, which is the source of them. And that comes to rest, the thoughts will fizzle out. But not to sit there waiting for it. The waiting for it is another thought. Will they? When will they? They still don't. Maybe he was wrong, or she. Certainly doesn't hold true for me. More thoughts. No matter how many different thoughts arise, let them remain right where they are. And this goes, as everyone is talked to or about in Doksan, this goes not just for thoughts, but for these sticky conditions of the body. Because every thought, every single thought, is accompanied by a physical something or other. Stickiness, tension, pain, ache, restlessness. All over, in the intestines, in the stomach, or in the heart, the throat, the back, the front, the top or the bottom. And even if there's no thought, sitting for how many incense sticks a day do we sit? Because we have these fat ones. Seem to last forever. That alone, it's not what we're used to, muscle-wise, tendon-wise. Can one leave all that alone? At least for the duration of this sesshin. What a burden falls off of one. If one can, leave it alone. There must be this real readiness, all right. Even if I get a heart attack, and it certainly sometimes feels like that. The pounding or the pain there. Maybe not all of you experience it and don't think something is wrong if you don't. Which doesn't mean to be unintelligent about one's physical condition. If there's a fever or really something that one notices is very unusual, then to write a note to the monja to take it up with them. We can get people to the hospital if necessary. But most of this stuff is not of this nature. Does it need to be sticky, or can it just be left alone? Embraced, been with like one is with a sick child or an ailing person. Not saying, well, you should get better, or you're going to be all right. None of that. Just to be with it, feel it, and have no words about it. Moo, who? Means I don't know what it is. What is it? What's at the bottom of this all? I don't know. I really don't know. If I know, then all my past reactions come in. It shouldn't be. I'm afraid of it. What will happen to me? And you're back in this wheel, which you all profess you want to be free from. And yet one loves to swing around on it. No matter how many different thoughts arise, let them remain right where they are. Don't give them any further attention. Don't give thought even to what you may find delightful. And that we usually don't find a problem. We just go on with that. But it's just as much a problem as the other. Being separated from what is. The who. Question the delight and don't call it that and don't indulge in it. Who, a moo? All this delightful energy right into the moo. Or the who or the what. What is it? Who is the enjoyer? You mustn't make your one mind into two. Not to make a conflict out of one situation, whatever it is at the moment. Moo is no conflict. Who or what is no conflict. It's giving everything the benefit of the doubt, without any judgment. If your mind is always set like this, it won't think about what is good and what is not good. And people come to this. Come into Doksan and say, I had a taste of that. I have a glimpse of what it is that you're talking about. I have seen it for myself. And there's a new energy there, a new buoyancy. Particularly if one doesn't stick to this feeling or wants to bring it back. It won't think it should not think about such things, it referring to the mind. It won't think it should not think about such things, or that it should cease to think about them. And therefore thoughts of good and bad cannot help but cease naturally. The same is true of displeasure and pleasure, which are both merely bred from your own self-centeredness. Such thoughts cannot fail to cease. At all events, always be careful of the unborn mind. Is one in touch with it? That is the question. And if not, what is it? Doesn't one absolutely be in touch with it? Not with the concept of it. It starts by not knowing what it is. That's what's important above all else, says Bankei. If you don't relax your vigilance, some people who superficially read Bankei say, oh, he talks about sitting like a Buddha. That's not taughtness, that's not this or that's not that. He had no successors. If you don't relax your vigilance. Remember another time when a person said, when I sit my Buddha mind, I find myself so idle. And Bankei say it's when you go from one thing to another, these compulsive activities. That's when you're idle. This Buddha mind, there's wakefulness, attention, awareness. Because one deceives oneself so easily, and others as well. If you don't relax your vigilance in this, thoughts of good and bad do not exist. That's what one person said in Doksan. I tried to look at a thought and it was gone. Whenever I look at the thought, whenever I look at fear, it's gone. Well, all right, à la bonne heure. Hoo, moo. They don't exist, and you will, of course, then have no thought to cease them either. This is the state of unborn and undying, is it not? Yes, it is. It is the unborn, undying Buddha mind, which does not just refer to a state of absence of thoughts. If there's such a state, who is the one who is experiencing that? Who finds it frightening or pleasurable? Always to keep on asking who until it is clear beyond all doubt. Bankei spoke to an assembly. It is a mistake to breed a mind in addition to the one you already have and to try to become the unborn. Since time immemorial, human beings have been obsessed with the idea of becoming something. Always an idea there, an ideal. And while one is preoccupied and occupied with the ideal, one doesn't see what is. It's very dangerous. Extremely dangerous. You're unborn from the very beginning. Everyone talks about the unborn's fundamental principle in quotation marks. But the unborn has no fundamental principle. If it had even so much as a fundamental principle, it wouldn't be unborn. How beautiful. What's more, there isn't any need to become unborn. The true unborn has nothing to do with fundamental principles. And it's beyond your becoming it as well. It simply is as it is. It's been said of the Buddha's teaching, when the Dharma King's Dharma, the Dharma King here referred to being another word for the Buddha, when the Dharma King's Dharma is understood, the Dharma King's Dharma is just as is. Bang like that. But it's not just as simple as just going around banging. Because where is the Dharma King's Dharma? And somebody steps on your toe. And I don't just mean by mistake, and one is gracious enough to understand that, but I mean really. Let's go for a moment to the Cleary book, under the chapter Sayings of Bankei. This was picked out because of this thing of becoming. Looking back on one's life, one says, well, I certainly am different from the way I was. Because this already involves a comparison, a memory of how one was. Without that, one wouldn't say that. But let's say one does. Try to remember how one was, and memories also, are not very reliable, but nonetheless. One has this feeling one has changed. There has been a change. One is different. Well, haven't I become something, and won't I become more in the future? See, though, that in all this, as a process of thinking, remembering, and projecting into the future, you must understand your mind. There's no thinking in these terms, there's no becoming. It's only what is, and can it be seen clearly and emptily? Not transmuting causes into effects, with love and compassion for all. Well, let's go back here to Bankei. He says, the inner truth which I discovered when I was living in a hermitage, and we read about that yesterday or the day before, when all of a sudden, after all these austerities, coughing up blood, almost dying, all of a sudden he realized he had never been born. And everything was taken care of in this unborn. The inner truth which I discovered when I was living in a hermitage when I was 26 did not differ in the slightest from the truth when I met the Chinese master Daoji and got his testimony of enlightenment several years later. Or right now, today. I don't know how old he is now, but he sounds like a very seasoned person. However, as far as complete illumination of the eye of objective reality and mastery of the supreme teaching and realization of great freedom is concerned, I am as different now from when I met Daoji as sky is from earth. Believing in and acting on this, you should seek the day of fulfillment of the eye of reality. Meaning, like Wang Po said at the moment of death, be diligent, be diligent. Or Renzai or Basu, he said, look, look. Not just today and that settles that if I've seen something. Look now. Someone asked, in response to this, is the complete illumination of the eye of reality accomplished with time and season? Or is it realized even in one day? The master replied, it is not a matter of time and season. It is accomplished only when the eye of the way is clear, without any gap. It is accomplished by the practice of single-minded devotion to nurturing it. See, he does not enter in on this question of time, which carries so many associations with it. Thought of failure, thought of discouragement, ambition. Doesn't enter in on it. Here it says, and a lot of these dialogues in this book are with one particular disciple of his who was probably the closest to him. In 1684, during a retreat in Tokyo, one day in the meditation hall, Isan, that was the name of this disciple, had an overwhelming transformation of state. And he went to see Bankei alone. He said, "Up till now I have believed your teaching. I've believed it. And been fooled by your words. Up till now I've believed your teaching and been fooled by your words." What a beautiful thing to say. Because as long as you believe, you're fooled. Because you believe in words. You don't see yourself, what's being talked about. Today I don't depend on the teacher's words. I've come to know my own business directly. Even so, all this is just what you've always been saying. It's hard to express in words. And Bankei says, even though you don't say it, I know it. There's a tacit understanding. In this connection, very interesting last dialogue here. I wasn't going to read it, but it fits so well. Once this Isan said, this the same disciple, "Master, I've studied under you for a long while. I have in addition had the honor of being your attendant for several years. As for the essentials of the Dharma, I have not the slightest doubts. But being by your side and seeing you like this, you're still a wonder to me." And now he quotes something from someone else. "The deeper I penetrate, the firmer it is. The more I seek, the higher it gets." Oh, we won't get sidetracked. "All I can ever do is heave a heavy sigh. Your great freedom in responding to those who come to see you seems to have no limit. It's like being on a ladder unable to reach the sun and moon. How can one arrive at that complete attainment?" And the master said, on the whole, Zen students can reach to 7 or 8 out of a total of 10. But there are 2 or 3 they cannot get past. I said, "How can one get past them?" I guess he's referring to sort of rungs on a ladder. And the master said, "There is no way. There's no way." That in itself is a total teaching. There's no way. Which doesn't mean no way. I said, "Someone hasn't reached complete attainment and there's no way he can. Where is his fault?" The master was silent for a moment and then he said, "It is because, after all, the aspiration in the great Dharma is weak." A layman asked, "Where do you go after you become a Buddha?" Bankei said, "When you've become a Buddha," see here he says become, he uses the words freely. "When you've become a Buddha, there isn't any place for you to go. Because you're everywhere, overflowing, even beyond the endless universe. On the other hand, if you become something else, instead of living in the Buddha mind, there's a great many places for you to go. Here's an interesting one. A woman said, as women are beings with deep karma, there's this idea, it was this idea, and maybe is, I don't know how it is today, that women, because of being women, cannot attain full enlightenment. They have to be reborn as a man to do so. And here's a woman who came and said, as women are beings with deep karma, they aren't allowed to climb venerable mountains such as Mount Koya and Mount Ye. Their precincts are closed to women. And Bankei said, there's a nunnery in Kamakura, it's closed to men. A priest said, a Zen master of the past said that great enlightenment comes from great doubt. Yet you don't make use of the great doubt in practices. Why? And Bankei said, you speak of a great doubt. Long ago, when Nangaku went to the sixth patriarch, and the sixth patriarch asked him, what is it that thus comes? He was totally bewildered, and for 8 years had doubts about it. It's one of the most famous dialogues that Wei Nang had with people who came to see him. This Nangaku was one of them. He stepped in there and Wei Nang said, who is it that thus comes? Now, interestingly enough, there are many different versions. In one version, Nangaku immediately says, if you give it a name, you have missed the mark. And there are other versions, which it took him 4 years, or 5, 6, 8. I must be aware that there are always different versions, because there are different teachers, and different recordings, and different people doing these recordings. Always be aware of that. Long ago, when Nangaku went to the sixth patriarch and he asked him, what is it that thus comes? He was totally bewildered, and for 8 years had doubts about it. Then he gave the reply, the moment you say it is this, you miss the mark. And Bankei continues, that is really great doubt and great enlightenment. If you lost your only surplus that you received when you became a priest and were unable to find it no matter how hard you looked for it, you would continue to search and search and search and would be unable to stop even for a moment. Hakuin uses the same example. If you lost your purse full of gold, you wouldn't stop till you found it, no matter how crowded the subway. Because you know you lost it. You know you lack it. That's real doubt, says Bankei. In other words, that's not manufactured. You lost the damn thing, you gotta find it. Gotta pay your bills. Besides, it's gold. You want to have it. Yes. The motive, the energy, everything is there. You don't have to build it up or arouse it. It's there. People nowadays say that they must have a doubt because people in the past did. And so they cultivate a doubt. It's not so much anymore, but in the earlier sessions, a lot of people came to Doksan saying, how can I find my doubt? Or how can I build up the doubt mass? What's the doubt mass? Don't you look around? Who can build it for one? Of course, it can be pointed out. Sometimes it needs to be pointed out because we get so used to conditions, so used to the news that it's too much. We're fed up with it all, so we don't think about it. And we may be too fed up with ourselves, so that we don't look at ourselves. Honestly, frankly, freshly, with a keen interest. What's going on in this human body-mind and his and her relationships? Because this is when everything comes up most, in relationship with others. But what we then do is project onto the other person and read him or her very clearly and remain opaque to ourselves. To make that one's practice, the instant one is upset over somebody else's doing, at least to look into oneself too. It doesn't mean that that person acted properly or adequately, but this inner upset must be looked at too. If it isn't, we haven't solved or resolved or seen a thing. A thing that will bring about change. People nowadays say they must have a doubt because people in the past did, and so they cultivate a doubt. That's merely an imitation of a doubt, not a real doubt. Thus the day never comes when they arrive at a real resolution. It is as if you were to go off searching for something you hadn't really lost, pretending that you had. But to be in touch with a feeling of one's inner lack, insufficiency, loneliness. Confusion. One person in Doksan said, all my life I seem to have lived behind a great curtain. It's the first step to become aware of this. Unless you become aware of this, then there's forever no energy to practice. Or just one needs to drum it up a little bit and then it fizzles again. To become aware. How automatic, how conditioned, how mechanical. How unrelated, even though one thinks one is related. Maybe it doesn't hold true for you. I'm not talking about you personally. But look at it. Out of this comes great yearning for practice, great urgency, really a consuming interest. Needing to do this thing, because one feels that one is responsible in one's actions for everyone else. Because everything affects everybody else. There's no doubt about that. Who? Oh. What is it? Not knowing. We'll stop here for today. The 4 vows.
All beings without number.